This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast is here, which you can get on all podcasting platforms. Just search Inside the Birds for their YouTube channel as well. Geoff Mosher is here. A lot of moves in week number 1. Some moves today that they lost players. We'll get into that as well. The trade that happened on Friday and Geoff Mosher's thoughts on it all now, where this team stands after the first official week of free agency has been in the books. What's going on, Geoff Mosher? How are you, my friend?
I'm great, Mike. I'm excited for the beginning of March Madness. It's going to be a fantastic tournament. There was already a good conference tournament. And then I think the NFL pretty much kicks off March Madness now with their first wave and second wave of free agency that gets everybody already excited if you're a sports fan. It's great. You know, Philly's about to start up. I mean, it's just I love March. March is a great sports month.
It is, and I love March Madness. You know, I'm off tomorrow. I'm heading down to Philly spring training tomorrow morning, so this is my last show until next week. I'm looking forward to all the madness, and you're right, because there's a lot of times, there's been a lot of years, for whatever reason, the NCAA tournament, because I really schedule my trip around the NCAA tournament, has been kind of shifted back a little bit. There's a lot of years I've been in Clearwater when the NFL free agency kind of kicks off, so I'm glad I was here for that, but it got kicked off. Let's look at some things and kind of get some thoughts from you. Let's go to the Kenny Pickett trade. There was a lot of people, myself included, said, hey, if I can get Justin Fields for a 5th-round pick, and I wasn't sure if that was possible or not, but I said, hey, make him an offer. What's the worst they can say? They got Fields, you know, for a 6 that could become a 4. You end up trading a 3. You got a 4 back for Pickett. But I get the monetary situation here. Pickett's less than Fields, and then Fields has that $25 million option here. But give us some thoughts on the whole backup quarterback, how this Fields thing kind of came to play here, because that kind of came out of nowhere.
Well, I think there's a couple of layers here, Mike. The Eagles were very, I don't want to say aggressive, but they, Adam and I reported on Inside the Birds this morning that they were really looking at a lot of different young developmental backup quarterbacks. My gut tells me that they felt like with their draft this year, they could not pull a Jalen Hurts scenario and use a high pick on a quarterback. They've got a lot of areas they need to address for building blocks. So they were able to get themselves a quarterback who can be considered a young building block type quarterback who can be a good backup behind Jalen Hurts. The way they had Jalen Hurts as a backup for Carson Wentz. They never knew that Carson was going to regress this much and Jalen was going to turn into such a good starting quarterback. But that is sort of what they're looking for now, and they also have Tanner McKee. And the second layer to that is what you mentioned, the finances of it, to have Kenny Pickett under 2 more years of really good cost control as opposed to Fields, whose 5th-year option would kick in at the end of this year, right, I think, and then the money would get even bigger. It just, to me, and then there's a third layer of that, which is I know for a fact that when Kenny Pickett was coming out of Pitt, Howie went to go, everybody knows Howie went to go see him. There was that meme of him with the binoculars and everything, but he was really fond of Kenny Pickett. And it's sort of like in the Saquon Barkley way, never had a chance to get him that year, had a chance to get him this year and brought him in because of all those factors that just make a lot of sense. Now, that's the reason to go get Kenny Pickett. You can also, we'll look at it from another perspective, right? The Eagles place a lot of value on backup quarterback. They want a guy who can come in and know the offense and step in and win a game. You know, when they got Gardner Minshew a couple of years ago for just a 6th-rounder, Gardner had a lot of starting experience at that point. He had gone in and had a heck of a rookie year. He won like NFL Rookie of the Year like 5 or 6 weeks. His first year, sure, he had regressed a little bit, but here's a guy they thought would come in, learn the offense, and give it a spark if need be. Beat the Jets, didn't fare so well the next year, but, he was able to give them steady play when he went in. You do have to wonder, with Kenny Pickett coming off pretty much struggles in Pittsburgh, is he the guy who can step in and win 3 out of 4 games if Jalen Hurts were to go down for a stretch? This is the same conversation we had last year about Marcus Mariota, another guy who was a 1st-round pick who had really regressed and was not coming off a very good year.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the backup quarterback, you get a former first-round pick. I was not a big Pickett fan. Could be biased because he went to Pitt. But that being said,
Who's going to ask you that, Mike?
that being said, I wasn't a big fan of him coming out of the draft. But that being said, what you gave up to get him, a guy was a first-round pick. I don't have a huge problem with. I just said I would have rather had Fields if that was an option. Don't know if it was. Don't know if they were interested or not.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, I know that they were exploring a lot of different guys. Adam reported that they were even looking in at Spencer Ritter. They were looking for someone who they could get on a discount.
Looks like we lost Geoff for a second there. We'll try to get him back. I think he meant Desmond Ritter, by the way, the quarterback from the Atlanta Falcons. There's Geoff. We lost you there for a second. We kind of froze up there. But, yeah, you mentioned –
Ritter did I accidentally say?
You said I think you morphed Spencer Rattler and Desmond Ritter together.
Yeah, I meant Desmond Ritter. Thank you.
Yeah. But, yeah, and then Rob Motti had reported Flacco. So it was obvious that they value the backup quarterback position. That's why this isn't like a crazy move. Like, what are they doing to bring Pickett in? But, obviously, Fields would have been a guy. And you always wonder, what are you looking for in a backup quarterback? A guy who fits your system, fits the style of play that your starter has? I mean, Pickett, is he a guy that is similar skill sets to what Jalen Hurts has?
It's a great question because a lot of people feel like your backup quarterback should be similar to your starting quarterback so you don't have to change your offense around that much. But I've also spoken to a lot of people, Mike, in personnel, in coaching, that like to have a different style of backup quarterback to the starting quarterback. And they say, if you're a good coaching staff, you figure it out. You just really want the best. If you got a quarterback who likes to run and throw, you'd like to have a thrower as your second string quarterback, just to give a different look to your offense and to the defense and be prepared for that. So there's arguments to be made for both, but clearly the Eagles have never felt, and I think people jumped to this conclusion last year with Mariota, but I didn't say it at the time. I don't feel like the Eagles ever feel like they need their backup to mirror the skill set of their starter.
Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast, Football at 4. Devin White also signed Thursday night, I guess that was. A lot of people reacting on Friday now that the dust is settled. Obviously, you're hearing a lot of reports about an undisciplined player, a guy who has not been very productive over the last couple of years, had one really big year, wanted a lot of money, didn't get it. And now he's here in Philadelphia. They need a linebacker. It's a big name. But give us your thoughts on the signing in general.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I like to say, and I said it on the pod this morning, two things can be true at the same time. I think we, as sports fans and media, sometimes have trouble acknowledging that. Two things can be true at the same time. One, he is a linebacker who has regressed, who is known. I spoke to an NFC personnel person who's seen a lot of Devin White, and he basically said what you just said. He's an undisciplined player. He's going to make a splash play or two that gets people excited, but give up 2 times as many plays as he makes, that he's not a very good tackler. He's out of position. He blows assignments. It wasn't a very good scouting report. But at the same time, the part of it that's true, that's a positive, is a 1-year deal. I believe that the reports are 3.5 is what it really is. It could be up to 7, but 3.5 is the base, the guarantee, which is not a lot of money. It doesn't mean you're married to him by any stretch of the means. And he is no doubt a supreme athlete. And if he can come into Vic Fangio's system, maybe get humbled a little bit by not having the big payday that he was looking for, by being benched last year by the Buccaneers, if he can sort of improve that element of his game that he's known for.
We lost Geoff here on the Sports Bash. We'll probably get him back here before, Devin White. We're talking about him. We're talking about, look, when they signed him as a linebacker there, it was obvious that the team needs a linebacker. But as the reviews have come in, very mixed reviews around what he can actually do. Not great in coverage, guy who's out of position a whole heck of a lot. And obviously it's a position that this team has really struggled to find guys in. And I think, one of the things is here too is you get a big name. I'm hoping that Roseman didn't go the route of saying, hey, let's go out and get a big name. let's go out and get a big name, and that will get people, to kind of like back off this whole linebacker thing. Let me try to bring in a bigger name so that we can kind of go down that route. I'm just hoping like that's not the way they're looking at this, and that potentially they can get another linebacker in here. We'll get Geoff back in just a second here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, as we continue our football at 4 here on a Monday edition. And look, we'll recap all the stuff that's happening here as all of the moves kind of get done. We'll try to let me see here. I'm getting I see he's in there, so it's on my side here. That's the problem. But I think I got him here in just a second. The one thing with Devin White, as I told you on Friday, I reached out to somebody in Tampa trying to get them to come on to talk about him a little bit, and basically they declined to come on. They didn't want to come on to talk about him because they basically said they didn't have anything good to say. So, all right, there we go. We'll get Geoff back into the conversation. There he is, Geoff Mosher. That was on my side, I think. I think we had a little bit of a little glitch on this side. But, yeah, I was saying before on Friday, I had reached out to people, a source in Tampa, to come on and talk about White, and he basically said, I don't have anything good to say. Not a good player. Bad signing for the Eagles. Bad guy. Not a lot of good reports. Just couldn't get anybody to say anything good. And I was wondering, like, in your mind, like, does Roseman make a deal like this based on what he said the other day, where he was basically like, or not the other, about a month, hey, there's this misconception that we don't value linebacker, so I'll go get a big name linebacker, and that'll kind of like make people say, hey, they did value the linebacker.
I don't know. I think Eagles fans have seen this act before with Ernie Sims, Takeo Spikes.
You and I were on the air together the day that Ernie Sims signed. You remember that?
I do remember that. Yeah, I do. Crazy. I think this is more that the Eagles value traits. He has tremendous athletic traits. I think that there were not a lot of, for $3.5 million, that's the best you're going to get, because that's not a lot of money. So it's not about valuing the position. $3.5 million, not a whole lot of money. They spent that before at that position. So we'll see. I think it's more like, can he humble himself and play in a different system? And, can we get something out of him? But to be honest with me, I think it's just about having bodies there who have played, who have experience. I wouldn't be shocked at all if the Eagles draft a linebacker high sometime day 2.
Yeah.
You saw that they continued to add the position anyway by getting Oren Burks. They already had Zach Vaughn. So they're just arming themselves with, it's the dart throw, Mike. They're arming themselves with guys, but it would take a lot, I think, for Devin White to wind up being a good fit for this defense.
Okay, I was going to say Oren Burks, they brought in from the 49ers as well. Is that a guy that is a special teams player? Or are they hoping that maybe if he gets more of a shot?
Yeah, if there's one area where maybe the Eagles have changed the last few years about linebacker, Mike, it's that they used to always have guys who are 6 foot, 6'1", 220, 230, that's what we got used to. That was the template for an Eagles linebacker. But last year, they brought in Zach Cunningham, a 6'3" guy, long arm, long leg guy. And it was like, whoa, Eagles actually have like height and length at linebacker. When's the last time you saw that? And Oren Burks is another guy, 6'3". I think he's up near 235, 240, good length. So that interests me. He's definitely someone they see as a backup / special teams player, but this is a guy who played a decent amount on the defense last year, came in when Dre Greenlaw busted his Achilles in the Super Bowl. So he's the first man off the bench. And I like a guy who played in that kind of system, downhill, attacking San Francisco system, front seven. So do I think he's going to start? No, and not unless somebody gets hurt or somebody falls flat on their face. But he's good depth to have, which is not what they had last year at that position after the top 2. Well, they didn't even really have good top 2. But, they didn't have enough depth.
Geoff Mosher, Football at 4. All right, we'll reset. We talked a little bit about Pickett, Devin White. They were the moves that happened late last week. Burks happened over the weekend. Today they lost Jack Driscoll. They lost Sue Opeta. What do you make of the depth on this offensive line? And not to mention, they do need a right guard still. How does losing Opeta, Driscoll, kind of impact what you think could happen at that right guard spot?
Well, they did sign Matt Hennessy, who's played center and guard for the Falcons. I do believe they went into free agency the whole period, like even in the offseason, knowing that there was a shot, pretty decent shot, that they would lose Driscoll and lose Sua Opeta, because they keep losing these guys, whether it's a Nate Herbig or a Coyote Owiska or Jack Anderson, right? They've been losing all of their developmental guys because people are finally on to the fact that, hey, Stoutland does a good job. Maybe we should go get these guys, Isaac Seumalo, right? So they did it. They did some pre-planning, right? They signed that guy. It didn't get a whole lot of fanfare. Darian Kennard from Kansas City.
Right.
He was a fifth-round pick of the Chiefs. So usually a fifth-round pick is a good depth piece, a backup player. He's a guy who was drafted as a tackle but played guard his last year in practice with Kansas City and projects there more. That's what I was told from Kansas City sources. So even though I think he's listed as a tackle, I wouldn't be surprised if the Eagles had him in mind as a guard/tackle with Matt Hennessy as a center/guard. And you also have Fred Johnson and you as a tackle and Tyler Steen, who will compete for right guard. And there's no doubt in my mind they're going to draft at the offensive line at some point. So that'll be another person. So if you think about that, that's 4 or 5 guys that will be there for depth for them to make up for the loss of Opeta and of Jack Driscoll.
Andre Dillard's available, by the way, if they want to bring him back in as a swing type of guy. What did you make of the whole Josh Sweat thing that ended up transpiring?
Eagles had all the leverage in the world. They were very unhappy with how the season ended from him last year. They were willing to let him go out. I think they might have been willing to just release him if he was not going to agree to that pay cut, because what was it, $16 million, I think, that they were owing him, and now it's $10 million. Now they guaranteed it, basically saying you're going to be on the team this year if you agree to this pay cut. So it makes me think that maybe that was the best offer that Josh Sweat could get out there. If he was cut, somebody would have given him maybe $9 or $10 million guaranteed, and if the Eagles are just going to match that and give it to him, he might as well stay here where he has more familiarity and comfort. That's how I would read the situation. Very likely to be Josh Sweat's last year with the Eagles, but I think it helps the Eagles to have him here and not have to, especially with the uncertainty around Reddick, right? You don't want to really start Bryce Huff and, I guess, like Nolan Smith as your edges. You'd be very, very light there. So I think having Josh Sweat back and maybe banking on a little bit of a resurgence or a better than what he showed the last 6 or 7 weeks is important for him. And because Josh Sweat knows he's going to be a free agent, so he can't be out there just chasing sacks and not really playing well and then getting himself benched. He's got to play well.
What does this tell you then about Reddick moving forward?
I still think if the Eagles could get a top 50 pick, they'd probably pull the trigger. I don't know that anybody's willing to do that and pay Hassan Reddick the money he's looking for. It does feel like with Josh Sweat getting that guaranteed money that maybe there will not be something there for Hassan Reddick. So I've always said, I feel like you can work this out the way the Chiefs worked it out with Chris Jones, which is once Chris Jones reported and decided he had no other options, right? The Chiefs gave him a couple of incentives that he met by winning the Super Bowl. You can do that with Hassan Reddick. Hassan Reddick's recourse, if he's not happy, is to hold out the whole year, and then you don't accrue the season, then you don't make it. The Le'Veon Bell route is not good for a 30-year-old pass rusher. It wasn't good for Le'Veon Bell. So the Eagles are still in the driver's seat here. It just depends on, as we get closer to the draft, Mike, will there be a team that bites and gives up something for him and gives him the contract he desires?
Yeah, it's interesting because, as you just said, I think the Eagles like Reddick. I don't think they want to lose Reddick, but I don't think they want to pay a guy who's in the 30-year-old range, and it could be, they don't want to pay for past performances, and you're probably not going to get as good as the years you got last year, which wasn't as good as the year you got before that.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me, though, if after the dust settles, we saw this with Slay last year, right? Yeah, after the dust settles, if both sides realized that there was no other solution, right, couldn't find it in another place, but if they could come to a short-term extension to make things work a little bit. Because Reddick, I don't think, lost a whole lot. You could say Sweat, you could talk about other guys. I don't think Hassan Reddick played poorly at all down the stretch. He didn't have this, he did finish with double-digit sacks, but I felt like he was one of the few guys who was still getting in the backfield quite a bit and being disruptive. He was just caught on a defense that was playing terribly. Then he was asked to drop back and do all sorts of things. So it wouldn't shock me if when the dust settles, if they kind of come to a mutual agreement and maybe you can get Reddick for another year after this one. Nothing long past, a year or two, but we'll see what happens.
Since the start of free agency, the initial Super Bowl odds, Philadelphia's has improved the fourth most out of everybody in the NFL. They started at 18-1. They are now 14-1. So it seems that the question you asked me last week, is the team better than they were? It seems that Vegas at least thinks they've improved a little bit.
I think probably fans, right, or people who follow the Eagles would have thought maybe a little bit more than just 18-1 to 14-1. But I think an objective entity like Vegas sees the Eagles and says, hey, wait, you still don't have a slot receiver. You still don't have much receiver depth outside of Devontae Parker. You still got two new starting offensive linemen. You lost a Hall of Fame center, right? You still don't have a safety outside of C.J. Gardner-Johnson. You're still not sure what you're going to get at linebacker, and you still have James Bradbury starting at a corner spot. So We'll bump you up a little bit because you've added some nice pieces and your depth is better at certain spots. But in the bigger picture, we're not quite convinced you're ready to go out there and rub elbow and really truly put the 1-7 finish behind you.
Geoff Mosher, everybody, the Inside the Birds podcast, Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash. And obviously the free agent period is continuing, but we're going to be turning into the draft season here shortly. We'll have all that for you and more. Football at 4 rolls on here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. Thank you, Geoff Mosher. I will see you next week.
Gotcha, buddy. Have a great time. Good vacation.